All of our productions at GCTV are brought to you in part by The Arbors at Greenfield, assisted living community providing a unique balance of independence and personal care that offers residents and families the most precious gift of all, peace of mind. Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com, call them at 773-0838, and check them out on Facebook. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all the productions at Greenfield Community Television.
About to enter the final segment of today's program, and I'm going to provide just a little bit of instruction, but before I do that, we have available here a very tasteful sweater, American-made, Coulter Bay, it says here, which was left in one of the breakout rooms, and so if the individual, very good, thank you. Okay, so how this is going to work is we're going to be using technology to be communicating with the governor and he with us. And so in a minute, his face will appear on that screen. He will hear my introduction, although not see me. And then he will speak. When he concludes his remarks, those who wish to ask questions or make statements will come forward. And I would suggest it'd probably be a good idea to sort of come around to here, this area, but stay in a line so that as the person who is sitting at the table concludes communication with the governor and rises and moves to the side, the next person can swoop right in, and we'll try to keep it tight so we can get as many folks in direct communication with the governor as possible during the period that we have. So with that, I'm going to ask that the governor be put upon the screen so that we can see him, even though he may not see us yet. And Governor, I hope you can hear me. Tug on your ear if you can. Okay, he waved hello, so he knows we're here. And Governor, we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us through technology to participate in a conversation with your constituents. The Martians are intervening here. Governor, okay, Governor, the Martians are now gone. So we want to thank you for joining in a conversation with your constituents here from Franklin, Hampshire, and a few actually from Berkshire County as well about municipal issues. We had a great session this morning on education, focused on the Foundation Review Commission, and Commissioner Chester was here. We had sessions on some transportation, public records, and a couple of others that escape memory at the moment. But now it's an opportunity for us to hear from you. I know you tried to get here last year and it didn't work, and we weren't ready to do technology, but this year, although you can't be with us in person in the flesh here in the room, you are very much here and present by virtue of Skype and technology. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the gentleman who serves as our governor and with whom I have the privilege of working every day and throughout the week in Boston. And
Thank you very much,
we have
Stan. Can you guys
there's
hear me? Somebody just wave if you can.
yes,
Awesome. Okay. I'm glad to see
very
that.
good. And so, without further ado, I'm going to introduce His Excellency the Governor, Charlie Baker.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I decided to go west this weekend. I just went a little farther west than you did, and I'm glad that we were able to use the elements of modern technology to give us a chance to chat a bit about what's up in the Commonwealth of Mass. I'll offer a few remarks here, and then I'd be perfectly happy and looking forward to some Q&A. Let me just start by saying that I continue to feel grateful and blessed to be part of the constellation of public and private officials here in the Commonwealth of Mass. We live in interesting times politically. Let's leave it at that. And one of the things I admire most about political dialogue in Massachusetts is people have managed, for the most part, to be able to agreeably disagree, continue to talk, and to do what I would describe as people's business, minus some of the distractions that passes for political discourse in many other places. I think one of the things we benefit from the Commonwealth is diversity of our economy. Depending upon what part of the Commonwealth you're in, there are different kinds of organizations and different kinds of capabilities that drive local economic development. And I think that diversity, especially in a modern age, has served us well. I'm going to come back to that when I talk a little bit about our economic development bill. But I also think the fact that as the world has gotten smaller, the focus and the importance of education and research and technology and science has sort of moved to the forefront, and those happen to be areas that it's arguable that Massachusetts is second to none in terms of our human capital, and our economic and our ecosystems and our sort of various clusters. Let me just spend a minute on this economic development bill, because that is something that is currently pending before the legislature and is of particular importance, I believe, to the Commonwealth. And it's something that I want to make sure is on your radar as we sort of roll into the final few months here of the legislative session. The bill was heard for the Joint Committee on Economic Development last week. I testified on behalf of the bill. So did our Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, Jay Ash. There were many others there as well from all over the Commonwealth testifying on one element or another. But the bill itself is about a $950 million collection of investment priorities, broken up into a variety of categories. The largest is a reauthorization of the MassWorks program. And I'm sure to any local official in this room, you need no introduction to MassWorks. What I will say is that I think in some ways it is among the most powerful tools that we as a Commonwealth have at the state level to assist and support housing development, economic development, and downtown development across the Commonwealth. And the reason for that is because of the flexibility of the program and the ability of the state to actually to use it as as almost like connective tissue as local communities and private for-profit and nonprofit organizations that they work with put together either housing development plans or downtown development plans or other economic development initiatives. And there are very few tools that we have in our toolbox that have the kind of flexibility and the ability to be tailored in a way that this particular program can be. The reauthorization for $500 million presumes that $500 million would be available to support local projects over the course of the next 5 or 6 years. And it's important, we believe it's important for this particular issue to be reauthorized by the end of by this session, so that we will be able to continue to issue grants under this program design this fall. There's a second element of this legislation, which is a $75 million matching capital grant program for what I would describe as human capital development. The idea that this particular program came about as a result of conversations and meetings that the Lieutenant Governor and I and Ron Walker, who's our Labor and Workforce Development Secretary, and Jim Kaiser, who's our Education Secretary, Secretary Ash, and others, had with lawyers, businesses, unions, trade, construction companies, and many others about the what I would call the skill building opportunity that exists for us here with respect to a whole variety of highly skilled and technical fields in which, if we don't do a better job of creating that skill base, young people and young adults are going to lose opportunities, take jobs that will be available. We probably will have some organizations and some businesses that might choose to grow here that will end up choosing to grow somewhere else. And this whole issue of skill building is not just a Massachusetts issue. When I went to my first National Governors Association meeting in February of 2015, there were about 40 governors there. And we got into a conversation about economic development. And in that conversation, we were asked by a moderator what the number one issue that would impede economic development in each of our states was. And since this was February of 2015, I said snow, because at that point it was pretty top of mind for me. But I would say of the 40 governors or so who were there, I would say more than 30 said skill building and doing a better job of creating the types of skills and offering access to the types of skill building initiatives that were necessary for people to be able to take the jobs that were both available then and would be available going forward was their primary impediment to economic growth. We incorporated $75 million into our economic development bill for this. It's a matching grant program, which basically means the state will provide the lion's share of the funding to community colleges and career and technical schools that are looking to invest collectively with employers in their region to either expand programming or update equipment or modernize their operation. And I don't know if 75 million is the right number or not. In our minds, that meant sort of 15 or 20 million a year for the next 4 or 5 years. Turns out that there are more opportunities to do this sort of thing, and there are more jobs that are available to be had, and there are more people looking to benefit from a program like this. Then that's certainly something that we would be more than happy to consider expanding. What I would say to all of you is we field tested this a bit earlier this year, and we took several sort of disparate programs that did a little bit of each of these things. We put them together into about a $9 million primer on this idea of a capital grant program and put it out through a traditional grant process. We got about 50 applications in. We ended up awarding grants to about 25 of the folks that submitted proposals to us. They were exactly the kinds of things you would want to see the Commonwealth supporting and investing in. And just to give you an idea about some of the ones in Western Mass, $300,000 to Bay Path Regional in Charlton, $465,000 to Berkshire Community College in Pittsfield, almost $400,000 to Dean Technical High School in Holyoke, almost $300,000 to the Lowell Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative in West Springfield, and $120,000 to McCann Tech in North Adams. And all of these were, equipment investments, program investments, capital investments, program expansions tied to very real employers in their communities where if they could make these investments, they believed, and we believed, they would be able to continue to improve on their ability to support people who are looking to build the skills they need to access jobs that on which you can basically build a life and make a living. And while this is an economic development bill, and people generally think about economic development bills as brick and mortar and infrastructure and that type of thing, from our point of view, this opportunity to create a targeted program that would invest in people and invest in some of the institutions that we believe are doing the kinds of work that can create the skill sets that will make it possible for folks to build a life and make a living was a good opportunity here, and we incorporated that into this bill as well. There are two other elements that I just want to mention quickly. One is a $50 million transformational development initiative for gateway cities. This is sort of a doubling down on something that was started during the Patrick administration. I think our view is many of these communities have a variety of issues and circumstances that we need to focus on collaboratively with them. Many of those communities have now signed up under a transitional or transformational development fellowship program, so that we are now collaborating and working with them on a variety of initiatives in their communities. And I feel pretty good about sort of where we are on this, but this 50 million will make it possible for us to turbocharge some of that activity. There's also a $75 million brownfields initiative, and I bring that one up for two reasons. The first is many of our older communities have commercial and industrial sites that would be worthwhile investment and economic development opportunities, but for the fact that the sites themselves need to be cleaned up, and that's a gating factor with respect to their ability to actually put them back into productive use. And what we would like to have the Commonwealth do is basically serve as the front end financer of that sort of site cleanup work, so that they'll be able to take advantage of those sites and put them back to work. The other thing we get if we clean up those sites and put them back into productive use is we avoid having people ignore those sites for further development and develop what I would call sort of green space, virgin space, open space instead. I think to the extent that we can be a partner in helping communities find ways to put that property back into productive use is a better alternative than having them seek new sites outside what I would call sort of their traditional commercial and industrial space. The bill itself has a number of other elements as well, which I won't bore you with today, except to say that the whole point behind this bill was to create a framework for collaborative work that could be done between the Commonwealth and the Commonwealth cities and towns. And we would urge you to take a look at the bill, determine which elements may be beneficial to you and to the folks in your communities. And then we would ask you if you would be willing to support it and encourage the Senate President and others to move on it sometime in the end of the session. I also want to mention briefly the municipal modernization legislation that we currently have pending before the legislature. I believe at this point, I think it's in House Ways and Means. I referred to that bill when we filed it as 200 pages of weed whacking. A ton of what I would describe as sort of cleanup and modernization and simplification of years and years, decades in many cases, of historic gunk and baked into statutes and regulations between state and local government, much of which has either outlived its usefulness or really needs to be sort of reformed and redone to be useful and appropriate in a modern 21st century economy. And that one in particular came about as a result of a lot of the conversations that the Lieutenant Governor, Karen Polito, and I had with local officials as we traveled around the Commonwealth. And we've gotten a fairly significantly positive amount of response from the folks on Beacon Hill. And actually, when we had our press conference to file this bill, we had over 100 local representatives show up and stand behind us when we announced it. And I believe at this point that with your help and the help of other municipal officials, a version, a good version, a helpful version, a constructive version of this particular bill can find its way through the process by the end of the year. And I would love to see that happen because as a former local official myself, I am more than a little aware of some of the peculiarities, let's call it that, of state-local relations. And the more we could do to peel some of that stuff back and give you the ability to do the things you need to do on the ground in your communities, I think in the long run, the better off we're all going to be. I also just want to mention briefly the time and the effort that many of you have spent working with us on our community compact program. This is sort of near and dear to the heart of the Lieutenant Governor and myself for a couple of reasons. One was we wanted to come up with some kind of a program model that could serve as a collaborative venture between state government and local government around best practices and sort of business process improvements and that type of thing. But we didn't want to do it with the typical way the state normally does stuff, which is through mandates. There are 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. 250 of those have less than 20,000 people. In many communities, as you all know, people are often wearing 2 or 3 hats in the course of their day-to-day work on behalf of their local communities. The whole idea of yet one more mandate on top of one more mandate on top of one more mandate seemed like a really bad idea. So what we came up with instead was this idea of a menu of opportunities, best practices that folks could take a look at and choose on their own which ones they thought would be most interesting for them. We would offer technical assistance with the help of the legislature we've been able to fund for the past couple of years. And then if folks chose to pursue a variety of those best practices and to work with us on them, they would get points when they bid on various state grants and state programs. So you could choose to participate if you wanted to, or you could choose not to participate. But the idea here was to treat it almost like as a local option and let local communities decide what they wanted to do or not do. And I'm pleased to say at this point we have about 160 communities in Massachusetts who have signed up to participate in one community compact or another. The Lieutenant Governor is hell-bent on finding a way to make sure that all 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts are participating by the end of our term. But for us, this has been a great way to open the door to dialogue and discussion with our colleagues in local government. And many of the ideas that actually showed up in our municipal modernization legislation came about as a result of the conversations that we had with people around the Community Compact Initiative in the first place. I do want to mention 2 other things, and then I look forward to discussing questions and observations and whatever else might be on your mind. One is the public records legislation, which the Senate President mentioned previously, that is currently in a conference committee before the legislature. That is something that we are interested in working with you and with the folks on Beacon Hill to see if we can make happen. We've put a series of sort of marks in place administratively around public records that we think create at least kind of a framework for the executive branch on this sort of thing. I do believe that if this is done right, it will make things easier and a little more routine for folks in local and state government. Obviously, if it's done wrong, just the opposite would be the result. But I do think this is one where there's a real opportunity here to do something that's helpful and not something that's damaging to the ability of local communities and the Commonwealth to meet our transparency obligations and to do it in a way that's both affordable and manageable and administrable, especially for some of our smaller cities and towns where I know this can become just a very complicated and difficult situation. The final thing I just want to mention briefly is the Senate President and I have had several conversations, as has the Lieutenant Governor, as have we with folks at MBI and Housing and Economic Development about broadband. Um, what I would say at this point is we are fully committed to solving this problem. Uh, but I believe that the process and the program model that we reviewed over the first year of our time in office that came out of MBI was not going to work for locals financially or administratively, and was probably not sustainable. And while we think the Wired West model with the 7 communities they're currently working with is an appropriate path for those communities to take, I think the financial burden that would be associated with trying to do anything like that across all of Western Mass is simply not feasible or financially affordable for you or for the Commonwealth. And we are currently working with a variety of parties to both access federal funding where we believe it is available, and those conversations are actually quite positive, and I believe if we play our cards right, there will bear fruit for us. And we're also talking to a number of the players in the service provision space about a whole variety of approaches to this that we believe create a more affordable and sustainable path forward. Speaking for the governor, for the lieutenant governor, and the rest of the administration, we get this is a very important issue, and it's why we committed the $50 million through the Mass Broadband Institute last year. But it's also got to be done in a way that works financially, not just on an installation basis, but on a go-forward basis so that it can be sustained over time. And it's also got to be done using what I would describe as a forward-looking approach to the technologies that are available. And unfortunately, I think we still have some homework to do on this one. I'd love to be able to say today that we figured this one out and we have all the answers. What I can tell you is I do believe we're asking the right questions, and I do believe we're talking to the right people. And it's my hope and expectation that in a fairly short period of time, we're going to be able to put a plan together that's a real path that will actually get us to where we need to go and will work for the communities in Western Mass, both financially and technologically. And that for me is sort of the big choke point here, which is when we started looking at the way some of this was going to work and what the expectation was about what local communities would have to pay to support this. Math just didn't work, and we said at that point, folks, we need to think a little differently about how this works. With that said, I'm happy to be with you this morning. I'm sorry that it's from 3,000 miles away or whatever it is, and I'm happy to take questions.
To repeat a little bit for the.
I heard everything. I heard everything you said.
Okay, so I think because broadband touches all the other policy areas of economic development, education, public safety, et cetera, and the folks out here, this is ground zero. We've been waiting for at least 10 years. I know myself, I've been working on it before the Western Mass delegation really got involved, and they are great. I appreciate that you want to take a thoughtful approach to it, but I would say, one, in terms of framing how you approach it, and also in terms of lifting up on the pause button, that there has been massive amount of thought. The amount of meetings and strategy, as you can appreciate, getting independent towns to work together and figure out both the organizational and the legal structures to do that, and then the political ability to get the cats to play together, that's been achieved. And so we really need to move forward. So as you're thinking about this, I would say please do it quickly, because we're all primed. And from the financing, with the Wired West towns, there's been an amazing amount of town level money that's been put up. In Shutesbury, I think the vote was 400 to 12. I'll say 400 to 12 for an override. That's talks about people wanting it. So I'd encourage you to move fast and just acknowledge all the hard work that people have put into it. So thank you.
No, I'm well aware. Yeah, I am well aware of the amount of work and effort that's been put into this, but I don't want to end up in a situation where the thing that concerned me about this was when we started digging into this, while there are many commonalities across these communities, there are also some big differences. And what works for certain communities may or may not, and I would argue probably won't work across all of the communities. And that means we're going to need probably more than one kind of solution to solve this problem on a sustainable basis. And I completely agree with you that speed matters here. But I also don't want to end up in a situation where people's expectations are badly missed with respect to both what it's going to cost and what it's going to do and how it's going to work. And I get the fact that economic development and education are, believe me, I am well aware of what's at stake here, and this thing has our full attention. And Michael, if you want to grab 2 or 3 people who are part of this and come on in and pay us a visit someday at the State House, I'd be happy to sit down with folks and have that conversation face to face.
I think the whole line of people, Governor, who are standing behind me all have the same message. They're all people involved in broadband that I can see, so I think they're all going to deliver it. As you've heard, we have been working on this for a long time. We know that different towns had options. I'm from Hawley. I'm also the chair of the Mohawk School Committee, so I know that broadband for all of the Mohawk towns is essential for us to provide the education we need. I know for Hawley, we'll never be able to afford fiber if the town has to contribute to it through tax money. But we're looking at wireless, and I know other towns are looking at wireless. And just as your community compact program is designed to empower the communities, I have a sense that communities feel like you're taking that back away from them yet again. We had a solution. We thought we were moving forward in 2014. We thought we were moving forward in 2015. We thought we were moving forward in 2016. And the last that I heard from MBI at a wireless meeting on Wednesday night was that they're doing a study of what wireless would look like in all 44 towns, and they probably won't complete that till the end of August, early September. So I hope you're hearing us, Governor. Thank you.
Governor, my name is Charlie Rose. I'm a selectman in the town of Worthington, and certainly don't mean to be redundant here. I simply want to ask, again, in relation to broadband, your last statement was that you're talking to the right people, and it doesn't appear that we seem to have any representation in this process. So I would simply like to ask what the plan is for representatives from the towns that are in fact affected by this. We have no seat on the MBI board. The Western Mass representatives are from Springfield and Lenox, and Linda representing FERCOG. As far as I know, that's it for Western Mass. So will there be hearings? Will there be a committee that includes members of our communities?
I'll make sure. I mean, I said it when Mike finished his remarks that I was happy to have a meeting with him and whoever he wants to bring. I would say the same to you. Why don't we just agree, working through the Senate President's office, that we'll get a bunch of people together and create some kind of some sort of way to engage this part of the conversation going forward. There's two things you guys need to know here. One is that I'm as frustrated with most of the information that I've collected on this issue as I think anybody. But at the same time, if we had gone ahead with that original proposal, there's absolutely no way you or we would have been able to fund it based on everybody's expectations about what they thought they were going to be in for. And I would much rather fix that before we end up so far down the road that everybody has to eat something that's dramatically different than what they were told they were going to have to eat in the first place financially. Because I'm well aware of the fact that, you know, dollars are precious here, and we got to make sure we get this right. And I got to tell you, folks, the fact that nobody had been chasing the federal money that was available on this previously, you know, state government will take the hit for that if we need to. But there is a lot of resource available there. And it wasn't even part of the plan the first time I was briefed on it, which made no sense to me at all.
Okay.
So I'm happy to have this meeting. What I would say is I'll put a little bit of this on my colleague, the Senate President. Stan, why don't you come up with a collection of folks you think it would be good to meet with? I'll get a bunch of folks on our team together, and let's have a sit down and go through some of this. I'd love to do that.
Thank you.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
Just a citizen from a small dot in the map called Charlemont. And again on the broadband issue. Sorry. Most state workers, entities within the Commonwealth, I think, really want to do what's best for the citizens of the whole Commonwealth, not just for their paycheck every week. One of the things that's bothered me most about this whole broadband issue is we have a state entity known as MBI who refuses to answer questions from my town select board. They wholeheartedly do not respond to their correspondence. They will not take any input from the towns at all. It's basically, we know what's best for you, even though my town is putting up 2/3 of the money for our infrastructure. I realize that that is contrary to what is normally done. Normally, the state puts up most of the money, so they should have a say in it. But the towns need a say in what they want. We're going into this with our eyes wide open. We understand that we are putting up $1.7 million of money for this infrastructure. We need it. I can't do this on dial-up. It just doesn't work.
Yep.
And we're totally frustrated with the spending of overhead money, over $400,000 for a company that has used faulty data and refuses to acknowledge that. They've also been given another $200,000 worth of authorization. To me, that's frustrating, to spend that much money and get no results, other than we're now going to make a criteria for doing it. What have they done for the last 8 years that they've been in existence, since 2008? I'm totally frustrated. My town is frustrated, and many of the people in this room are frustrated with the inability to move forward on something that's critical to our infrastructure. We're all suffering, and it's unfair. And thank you for your time.
Message delivered, and I completely understand your frustration and your concern. We'll make sure we get together and have this conversation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Governor. My name is Calvin Carr. I'm from Heath. I'm on the planning board. And I guess my position is that your administration, as well as Stan's legislature, needs to understand the urgency of the problem of broadband, or the lack of it. Our towns are dying. Our population is going down. Our school enrollment is going down, which means more taxes on us. We can't sell our homes because young people come out and say, I love this area. I love the house. They ask two questions. Do you have broadband? No. Do you have cell service? No. They're gone. So we have houses on the market that are not being taxed, which means our tax rates go up. It's a public safety issue. Our own fire station in Heath doesn't have any connection to broadband. It's in the center of town, and that's it. In the winter months, you drive by the center of Heath, and I'm sure it's in these other towns. There are parents sitting in their cars so their children can do homework that they got at the school. There are people in the town of Heath who cannot take community college classes from this community college because they don't have internet service, and they don't have books because everything's on the internet. So it's a public safety issue, it's a health issue, it's an economic issue. We need a bloodline to keep ourselves alive, and that bloodline is broadband. We don't have any economic growth out here because no one comes out because broadband is not here. We're losing population, as I said. Our towns are getting old, and if something doesn't happen soon, these towns really will wither on the vine, and it'd be a shame to see it. I know you drive through these towns back and forth when you go to the western part of the state, but we are here and we need your help. And I believe that broadband is like electricity used to be and the telephone used to be, that we as citizens have an equal right to that as the people do in Boston, and it's incumbent on the government to give us those equal rights of broadband so we can have the same quality of life as the people in Boston do, and our towns can survive and grow. So I want to bring that to your attention, and I trust that you will respond appropriately. Thank you.
Hi, Governor. Dylan Corpita from Deerfield, Mass. And hope you had time for a quick non-broadband question. First of all, I want to thank you for the work on the municipal modernization bill. I think there's a lot of things in there that will really help a lot of the cities and towns across the state. And the specific question I had was related to OPEB funding, which is something that impacts a lot of entities across the state. And from a big picture standpoint, how does your administration feel about having each town, all these different entities setting up separate trusts, making investments of varying degrees, having liability streams that are changing as different town dynamics are changing? And then as a town official, or I'm on the finance committee, how do we think about prioritizing these investments now in the very short term versus other short-term needs that the towns have? It's a asset liability mismatch, something you'd be very familiar with from the private sector, or you have long-term liabilities and you're thinking about short-term funding. What would be your recommendation or perspective on that issue?
So that's a really good question, Dylan, and we've been actually talking with some of our colleagues, both in state and local government, about OPEB generally, and I guess what I would say is I think this is one where the hard part here is trying to decide what the right combination of consolidated and shared risk is versus sort of independence and the capacity to stand alone on this. I mean, it feels. I mean, my comment would be it's a little bit like the pension system, where there are a lot of people who believe that everybody should be in the same pension system, that's the best way to diversify everybody's risk, that if you had, if everybody was a member of PRIM, that would be the ultimate diversification and the ultimate shared risk across all the Commonwealth cities and towns. There are a lot of local communities who don't believe in that. We have 135 pension systems across Massachusetts, although there's a pretty decent case to be made that we probably ought not to. But some of those 135 can show that they actually outperformed the PRIM system over the course of the past, pick a number, 5 or 10 years, and therefore they believe that continuing to run and manage their own system is better than getting into a situation where they're part of a larger system. OPEB to me feels very much the same way, which is there is no right. I do not believe at this point there is any consensus on whether or not OPEB should be dealt with on a community by community basis or on a statewide basis or regional basis. I mean, I have not heard in all the conversations I've had with people about this issue what the preferred platform, the preferred approach would be. If there is a collection of folks who do have a view on this that is sort of a consensus point of view, I would be really interested in hearing that, because I do think this is an issue we're going to have to bite off over the course of the next few years, and then obviously on a go-forward basis for a very long time. But I don't believe there's a general agreement about whether this should be dealt with regionally, individually, or on a statewide basis. I mean, what do you think?
What's that?
What is your view on that? As somebody who obviously sounds like they've thought about it a bit.
I think it's very challenging to see. Well, I think that there's some concerns about pension systems, how they're set up, and how exposed they are to capital markets. We've had 5 or 6 years now where stock market's been up previous to last year 10, 20%. So a lot of unfunded liability systems that are invested in capital markets are going to look great in that sort of scenario. The question is not even stock markets going down, but just flat. Those liabilities aren't going to be minimized, and the tax burden is going to go up. And the assessments, whether it's for health insurance or pensions or OPEB, could increase as well.
And that's why I've thought for a while that creating a more shared risk model would probably be a good idea. But a lot of my colleagues in local government worry a lot about control with respect to that stuff. And that's a legitimate issue. But I guess what I would say, Dylan, is I would like to get some folks, I would like to create a more formal process to have this conversation and see if we could come up with something people could agree on and then pursue legislatively, because I do think this is sort of one of the big sort of around the corner problems, issues, concerns that we are going to have to start to deal with in a more serious and explicit way.
All right, thank you for your time.
Yep.
Good afternoon, Governor. My name is Jim Draw. I'm a selectman in Cummington, and I'd like to bring you back to broadband.
Go right ahead, Jim.
Last May, we had our annual town meeting, and we had a record turnout. We had standing room only. And we had a unanimous vote. People understood that the $1.4 million that we authorized could potentially come out of their taxes, and they were willing to pay for that. The other 23 towns in their annual town meetings last May had similar situations. We had 2 towns that had a turnout large enough they had to move the venue across the street to the church. And in all cases, those votes were either unanimous or there were half a dozen people that voted against it. People out here are hungry, and they're willing to pay what it takes to get good quality broadband. Wireless is not good quality broadband. Wireless has a cap of 50 megabits. That is not sustainable in the long run. We need fiber, and we're willing to pay for it. So doing a wireless study and taking another 6 months does not make any sense to me. Spending $500,000 to do a wireless study for people that don't want it, for the 3 towns that say they can't afford fiber, if you gave them the $500,000, they could afford the fiber. Doesn't make sense to study this thing. We're in analysis paralysis. We've been at this thing for 5 years now. The MBI has had the opportunity for the last 2 years. We understand that they're the gatekeepers, but they have yet to write the rules of how we unlock the gate. We need a set of rules. We're putting up 2/3 of the money. We need a voice in what those rules are, not just sitting at the table listening. We need to be in a drafting position and have the veto power over what those are. This is a home rule state. This is our money that we're spending. We want control over how it's spent. We don't want to be dictated to by a bureaucracy. And last, we want some sunshine. How much of the $50 million has already been spent? What was it spent for, and what was accomplished with it? We want a monthly status report from MBI. What did you spend this month? What did you spend it on? What did you accomplish with it? What are you going to accomplish in the next month? A monthly status report on their website and in the local papers so that we can track what progress is being made, what direction is going, what everything is going to. I will take you up on your offer to come visit you and present our case to you. Thank you for that offer.
Yep, look forward to it. Thanks, Tim.
Hi, Governor. My name is Andrew Steinberg. I'm on the Select Board in Amherst and a former member of the Finance Committee in Amherst, and also have been actively involved in school regionalization discussions in our area. So I'm not going to talk about broadband, and I do want to thank you for your reports earlier about economic development and municipal modernization. The topic that I just wanted to mention very briefly is the charter school issue. I know that we're in the situation now where we're looking towards a possibility of a statewide initiative vote and legislative action, and I'm aware of what your statements have been in support of lifting the charter school cap. But I do want you to consider for the very small districts that are predominant in Western Massachusetts, that every child who leaves for a charter school has a substantial effect on many communities' ability to continue to provide elementary and secondary education to the students within the schools in their districts. And the money that is being siphoned to the school, to the charter school from the public school, has a substantial effect on the public school's budget and is severely harmful to the education of the vast majority of children who are in our communities and will not be able to go to the charter schools. So that as you look at lifting what your position is on lifting charter school caps, I really encourage you to think very carefully about the impact on the kinds of districts that we are responsible for and I think are running very well in Western Massachusetts. So thank you.
Thanks for the question, by the way, and thanks again for serving in local government. A couple thoughts. One is we actually proposed a change in the funding formula as part of our budget in House 2, which we filed back in January. And the reason we did that was we had heard from a lot of folks in local government about the way the funding formula works, and that's something that we've said before that we're open to conversations on. And I certainly know that as the Senate President wrestled with this with his colleagues in the Senate, this issue was a big part of their conversation as well. I guess the one question I would ask you, because I hear about it from other local officials, help me understand what's different about the charter school formula versus the Voc Tech school formula, where basically if kids leave your community to go to the Voc Tech school, the money follows the kids to the Voc Tech school the same way it follows the kids to go to the charter school.
Yes, the vocational school issue is a separate issue and also has a substantial impact on many local districts. For a district of our size, we are making more efforts to try and build up some of our own programming to offer the kinds of things that the students are looking for in switching to vocational schools. I'm not the best person to speak for the very small districts, but I think that for small districts that an increasing number of students going to vocational schools also has a substantial effect on their budgets, and I hope that some of my colleagues who are from the smaller communities will join this conversation.
Very helpful. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Hey guys, I got time I think for one more. I apologize. But you've pretty clearly delivered a variety of messages here. So don't worry about that.
Hi, I'm Nina
Finally
Martin.
a woman.
Excuse me?
I said, finally a woman. What
Yes. I saw the men and said, one of us has to get up there. My name's Nina Martin Anzoni. I'm on the school board for Mohawk Regional Trail School District. I live in Coleraine. I've had a lot of hats in Coleraine, too. First, to answer the charter school question, the vocational school has to come to our town meeting and justify their budget. The charter school does not. The money simply leaves and does not have to answer back to the taxpayers. And it's a big issue when you have 8 towns So that's one of my issues with the charter schools. But I wanted to talk to you about scale. So my town has a school. Our school district's in trouble. I'm sure you've heard about a lot of issues. We try and be creative. We want to, be responsible guardians of our students in our town. We've talked about trying to put elder housing into the school building, have a mixed-use building. I've been told that there is no way that anyone's going to give us funding to put 5 or 6 units into that building. And it's the type of thing we hear over and over again in the small towns. So I've asked if we get 3 towns together, and each of those towns have 5 or 6 or 7 units in their town, would that be okay? They want one central building, they want 100 units, and it's just not feasible in our area. So any creativity that we can come up with gets cut off because we're not seen as a big enough project. So we can't solve problems if we can't solve them on the scale that works for our towns.
So is this through the Mass School Building Authority,
Well,
or something? Or is this more of an issue with respect to Mass Housing Finance?
All
or
of
both?
it.
All
All
of
of
the
it. You get the same thing from almost any department you deal with across the state. I've dealt with public health on issues. I've dealt with, my husband's in fire, we deal with the fire. It's
Yeah.
the type of issue that we constantly get blocked on. And
I'll tell you
somehow the
what.
state has to rethink it so that we can do our 5 or 6 units and solve the problem in our town, or work on the scale that works for us instead of the scale that works in Worcester.
I get it. I understand what you're saying. Let me tell the Senate President that I will let me chew on that one and see what I can come up with. I understand completely what you're saying with respect to that, and that's a legitimate issue.
Thank you.
That. Okay.
Governor, we have, when we come down toward the end of the list, we go into what we call a lightning round so that the people who are actually in line at the time is called at least have a moment to share an idea. Could you give us 3 more minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Because there were 3 in line, now I see 4. I'm so sorry. Would you give us 4 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Are we okay? Okay, 1 minute each, and I'm going to watch the clock, and I'm going to say thank you.
Hello, I'm Kathy Reinig. I'm a selectman in the town of Orange. I want to thank you for all the work Jay Ash, their secretary, has done coming out with us. Vacant housing is a severe issue in both Athol and Orange, which crosses the county line. I know that there's some efforts being discussed about creative ways to both assist families without housing and fill vacant housing, and I just want to make sure that that's on your radar and is going to be positively received, at least to listen to the ideas when they come forward.
Yeah, I actually have talked to Jay about that. And Orange, by the way, is a really cool town. I've been there several times, and I'm thrilled to see that you're dressed appropriately to be.
Thank you. Next time you come, let me know so I can come talk with you, because I haven't seen you in town yet. We've just missed each other.
We can go pay Pete's Tire Barn a visit.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, we'll do.
Good afternoon, Governor. John Ward from the Gill Select Board. I shared a panel today with your Director of Legislative Affairs, Solly Singleton, and she gave a very lengthy presentation on the cost of solar to non-participating ratepayers, and a net metering bill has just passed the House and the Senate, and I fully expect that when it comes to your desk that you're going to sign it. The unfortunate piece is that this bill, the solar industry had a gun to their heads while we were trying to work this bill out, and I really think that we compromised more than we should. The problem with the presentation that was done today is everything that I heard was cost, 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 subsidy, subsidy, cost, and I didn't hear anything about any of the benefits. And I've been involved in this conversation for the last couple of years, and there has been no valid, in-depth cost benefit
analysis to show price suppression effects on the grid, benefits not only to the people that participate, but non-participating ratepayers and the Commonwealth at large. And I was wondering, after this bill is signed and there is a slight relief to the solar industry in the net metering cap, if this conversation can be extended and reframed where we actually do have a cost-benefit analysis and value of solar study so that fair compensation can be made for those who contribute electricity to the grid and have made the capital investments for this equipment and so on, would your administration be open to this conversation going further and going in a different direction?
Yes, with one caveat, which is that I really want to make sure we get the rest of the omnibus energy bill done. Solar, and I'm glad the legislature finally got this accomplished for all the reasons that I think everybody else did. We filed our bill on solar just about a year ago. But we have some major league baseload problems that we have got to deal with as part of a larger energy initiative. And my hope is that that bill can get done between now and the end of this session. But I certainly think, and I've had this conversation actually with Stan on a couple of occasions about, well, what it is, if you get out of the business of trying to jumpstart and create an industry by overpaying for it, which is sort of what we did with solar to get it going, what is the so-called steady state, arrangement around pricing? And I don't think we know the answer to that question. And that is, in some respects, what you would describe as a cost-benefit discussion, because what you want to do is get to the point where there's just kind of a standard way of doing business here that just exists on a go-forward basis, and you don't end up having to come back to it every couple of years over and over again, which creates uncertainty and difficulty for everybody, the installers, the users, and the rest of the system as well. And I would agree with you, and I think Stan would agree with you as well. We don't know what the steady state numbers should be on this, and that's something we should be talking about.
Yeah, the unfortunate piece is that nobody's looked. And when we've asked for that to be looked at, nobody's willing to dive in and actually look at the numbers. They're willing to take what the utilities say basically at face value, and those figures are skewed. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand that part. Okay.
Hello, Governor Baker. I am Darlene Graham, and this is a totally different subject. I just wanted to thank you for providing money and funds for increased treatment for drug and alcohol people. I just recently lost a friend of mine just lost her brother to alcoholism due to inadequate treatment. And I just want to commend you. I heard your speech at the beginning of the year about this, and I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. I really appreciate that, and I'm sorry. By the way, Darlene, the Senate President was terrific on this issue. You should give him a high five, too, okay?
Hello, Governor Baker. My name is Anne Renee LaRouche. I live in Northampton. My topic is the electrification of transportation. I've been working on what I call electric mobility initiative here in Western Massachusetts. I'm very excited about what's happening in the state and the ambitious goals for putting like 300,000 EVs on the road by 2025 and all of that. But I just want to make sure that Western Mass doesn't get bypassed. And so far, looking at the one-year report of the More EV program, there are large areas in Western Mass that have not seen any participation. A lot of the same towns that are suffering from the broadband issue. So I just want to hear from you what your administration will do to help this happen in Western Mass as well as the rest of the state.
Well, since we only have a minute and we're almost out,
Yeah.
is that I will talk to Stephanie Pollack, who's our Secretary of Transportation, about your concerns with this one, and that's another one where I'm sure I'll be able to connect with Stan on it sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So, Governor, thank you so much. Let's give the governor a round of applause. Thank you, Governor, and safe travels.
So the best part about this, Mr. President, a couple of guys like you and me who are so not techie at all actually managed to pull this off, which means we have really good staff.
That's great. Well, thank you again for joining us, and safe travels home.
Thank you. Take care.
All of our productions at GCTV are brought to you in part by The Arbors at Greenfield, assisted living community providing a unique balance of independence and personal care that offers residents and families the most precious gift of all, peace of mind. Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com, call them at 773-0838, and check them out on Facebook. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all the productions at Greenfield Community Television.